Alright guys, so we're going to pick up right here on the 6.2 and 6.3 practice. It's just some more practice factoring trinomials like we had talked about in class that comes from both of those sections. Okay, so let's start with this first one. Letter A, we have, let's let that focus, there we go. We have 8x squared minus 10x plus 3. And so if you remember, whenever you're factoring, you have to try to think about the factors of this 8 and the factors of that 3 as well. Okay, if your leading coefficient right here in the front, you can see that 8 it's not a 1, and so it takes a little bit more work to factor this one. So that's what we're focused on right now, is the fact that there's an 8 right here in the front. Okay, so we're going to come over here to the side, and what we're thinking about is we're thinking about the factors of 8. Okay, and remember the factors of 8 can be 8 and 1. It could also be 2 and 4, and we're just going to be guessing and checking here. Okay, so we definitely know there's going to be an x times an x because we have an x squared, but it can be 8x times 1x, or it might be a 2x times a 4x. So let's just try 8 and 1. And also we know that, remember I told you that this 8x squared comes from the FOIL doing the first times first, and this positive 3 at the end is going to come from the L in FOIL, which will be our last times last. And the only factors of 3 are 3 and 1, so we can try out a 3 and a 1 right here, and there's our last times last. And remember, this negative 10x comes from the O and the I and the FOIL being combined together. Okay, so we're going to try 8x and 1x, and then 3 and 1. Okay, now this is a positive 3, so that means it's either a negative 3 times a negative 1 or a positive 3 times a positive 1. And then when we look to the middle, we realize that's a negative 10, so that's a clue to us that these have to be negatives. Okay, so we put a negative on both of those. And then we try to see what happens whenever we do our inside and our outside terms right here. Okay, so that's our focus now, to see if it makes that negative 10x. Okay, so when I do the outside, I get negative 8, and when I do the inside, I get negative 3. Okay, and that's going to make negative 11. So we know that's not going to work because we're looking for negative 10. So this is not the way we're going to factor. Okay, now we can still try again with the 8x and the 1x, but we can reverse the 1 and the 3 and see what happens. Okay, and we're going to again look at our inside and our outside right there. Okay, the outside terms makes negative 11. And right here, this makes negative 1. Negative 11 and negative 1 makes negative 12. So that's not going to work. Okay, so we've exhausted all the possibilities for 8x and 1x. So we're going to come over here and we're going to try some other factors of 8. So we can try 2x times 4x. And again, go with our 3 and our 1. They're both negative. Okay, so we're going to do our inside and our outside. Okay, inside makes negative 12x, outside makes negative 2x. Okay, negative 12x and negative 2x is negative 14x, so that's not going to work. And again, we're looking for this negative 10x in the middle. Okay, so let's leave our 2x and 4x, but let's switch the 1 and the 3. And we're going to do outside and inside. Okay, when you do the outside, this makes negative 6x. And the inside makes negative 4x, and when you combine those together, that's negative 10x. That's exactly what we're looking for. So we found the correct factorization right here. All right, let's go down here and let's try letter B. Okay, on letter B, we need to, again, make sure there's no GCF, and I didn't mention that up here, but there is no GCF here. 8, 10, 3, there's not one, so we just go straight to trying to foil or unfoil it. And right here, there is no GCF either, so we're going to go straight to trying to break this down. Now, there's a couple different factors we could use to get 21. We could use 1 times 21, and we could use 3 times 7. So there's a couple different ones we can work with. Let's go ahead and just, let's try out 3 and 7. Okay, so we've got 3 and 7, so it's going to be 3x times 7x. And the factors of 10, we could use 5 and 2, we could use 1 and 10. So let's just throw some in there. Let's try 5 and 2. Okay, this 10 is positive, which tells us this is either negative 5 times negative 2 or positive 5 times positive 2. Well, since the middle term right here is negative, there's our clue that we're going to have a negative in there. All right, so let's try this. Let's try our inside and our outside terms. Okay, Our outside terms make negative 6x. Our inside terms make negative 35x. And so let's see what happens when we put those together. Negative 35x with negative 6x makes negative 41x. Oh, we got lucky the first time. Okay, looks like we have the correct factorization right here. Okay, and if you want to continue foiling it out, you can, and you see that it builds back up to this trinomial. All right, this third example is x squared minus 12x plus 36. All right, we're going to break it down again. There's no GCF, so we know it's an x times an x. Okay, we're looking for two numbers that will multiply to make this negative, or the positive 36. So we have to have a product of 36, and we have to have a sum of that negative 12 that we see in the middle. Okay, so let's think of the factors of 36. We could use 6 and 6. Okay, and you got to think that because this is a negative 12, that we're going to be putting together either a positive 6 and a positive 6 or a negative 6 and a negative 6, since we have a 36 there that's positive. So it's either 6 times 6 that makes 36, or it's negative 6 times negative 6 that makes 36. And since we want our sum to be negative 12, we're going to choose the two negatives. Okay, so we're going to put in a minus 6 and a minus 6. And you can see when you work that out that your inside and your outside terms, that's negative 6x and negative 6x, which together makes negative 12x. That's what we need in the middle, so we have the correct factorization. Okay, let's come up here to letter D. All right, first look for a GCF. 5 comes out of the first two terms, but it doesn't come out of the last one, so that's not going to work. 4 will come out of these two, but not out of 25, and there's no GCF here. So we're just going to break down to our two binomials, and we're going to think of the factors of 25. Okay, 5 times 5 makes 25, so we could try that out. So we can try out 5x and 5x. Okay, to get 4, we could do 4 times 1, or we could do 2 times 2. So let's try out 4 times 1. All right, this is positive and that's positive, so we know all these signs are positive. All right, so let's try this out here. Outside makes 5x when you multiply. The inside makes 20x. So we have a 20x and a 5x, which is a 25x. Okay, that's not what we're wanting here. We're wanting a 20x in the middle. So we know this is not correct. Okay, we can still keep our 5x and our 5x and try out the 2 and the 2. Okay, outside makes 10x, inside makes 10x. 10x and 10x makes 20x. That's exactly what we want in the middle. So we have the correct factorization right here. All right, now let's try out letter E. Okay, for letter E, do we see GCF? Let's see, we have 16 and 8, but that's not going to work here. We have x's there, but no x in the last term. We have no y in the first term, so there's no GCF. So we're going to go ahead and break it down. We got to think of the factors of 16 and then the factors of this 1. That's the coefficient of that last term. Okay, so the factors of 16 could be 4 and 4, or it could be 16 and 1, or it could be 2 and 8. So we got a lot of options there. Okay, so let's just try out 4x and 4x. And the factors of 1 could be 1 and 1. All right, now because it's a positive 1, it's either a positive 1 times a positive 1, or it's a negative 1 times a negative 1. Okay, so we can try out both of those. If it was a positive, though, then that's going to have all of our stuff coming out positive once we do our outside and inside, and we see that we want a negative 8 in the middle. So I'm going to go with a negative 1 and a negative 1. Okay, outside is negative 4x. Inside is negative 4x. When you put a negative 4x with a negative 4x, you get a negative 8x. And that's what we're going to want there. Oh, and one thing I left off here was this y squared at the end. So that comes from a y times a y. Almost left that one out. So if you see an x squared at the front, you know there's going to be an x and an x. If there's a y squared at the end, it's going to be a y and a y. And then we're using the 1 and the 1. And you really don't need those 1s in there. We could just call this 4x minus y times 4x minus y, and that gives us our negative 8xy in the middle. All right, going to letter F, we're always going to factor out our GCF. Oh, this time I see a GCF, it's that 4 can come out. But also if your leading coefficient is negative, you want to pull the negative out with it. So we're going to pull out negative 4. So negative 4 times x squared makes negative 4x squared. Negative 4 times x, a little sloppy there. Negative 4 times negative x would make positive 4x. And then negative 4 times negative 6 would make that positive 24. Okay, so if you think if you distributed that back out, it would build back up to that trinomial. Okay, so this negative 4 just hangs out on the front. We're going to go ahead and break down the trinomial into 2 binomials. Okay, so we have to think of the numbers that are going to factor to make this negative 6 happen, and they have to join somehow with summing or adding to make that negative 1 in the middle. So let's think of the factors of negative 6. Okay, so we got to think over here. Negative 6 can come from a 2 times a negative 3, or a negative 3 times a 2. It could come from a negative 6 times a 1, or a 6 times a negative 1. Okay, and those are our options. Okay, and so we can start playing around with those, but we also have to remember we're looking for something that's going to make this middle term right here be a negative 1. Okay, so we can take these one at a time. 2 times negative 3 makes negative 6, and then let's check if 2 plus negative 3 will make negative 1. And it does. Check. So it works for both, so we know that that's the one we want to go with. All right, so we're going to use an x and an x to get our x squared. We're going to use a 2 and a negative 3. And if you want to double check it, you can go back and check your outside and your inside, and a negative 3x and a positive 2x makes that negative 1x in the middle. So here we have the correct factorization. Okay, so there's one more section, section 6.5. I'll just put that into a different video, but there's you a little more practice with some factoring for section 6.2 and section 6.3.